your headlines tonight. Desperate times, desperate measures. Sri Lanka to begin weekly fuel rationing, Energy Minister says, as unable to manage fuel line amid crisis. Plan B. Prime Minister Ranil Wickremesinghe says Russia will be the go-to option for fuel should all else fail.
If we can get from any other sources, we'll get from there. Otherwise, they may have to go to Russia again.
Also responds to questions on China-India in Sri Lanka crisis management.
Would you say that China has ditched Sri Lanka in its hour of need?
I won't say that. I don't think they have ditched Sri Lanka.
What will you tell Prime Minister Modi?
Thank you.
Under pressure, CEB chairman apologizes and withdraws statement he made at COPE on Indian government stressing to hand over Manna wind power project to Adani. Mismanagement. Litrogas Lanka Limited unable to supply LPG gas to market, not just due to dollar shortage. All this and much more coming up tonight, this Sunday, the 12th of June, 2022.
Surf Excel නම් භාගයයි මාසයකට වඩා රිදි සෝතයි.
From AdaDerana, this is AdaDerana First at 9. Live from Studio 24 in Colombo.
And a warm welcome. You're joining us on AdaDerana English News on AdaDerana 24. And I'm Indivari Amwat. Sri Lanka will begin issuing weekly fuel coupons starting July until the island secures steady fuel supply. Minister of Power and Energy Kanchana Wijesekara said today that the measures will be taken to register consumers waiting in line for fuel and issue them with guaranteed fuel quota for a week from the first week of July. This, the minister says, will have to be the way forward given that it has become impossible for fuel line management as consumers stock on months' worth of fuel for generators and other machinery despite the fuel cap issued for vehicles.
Minister of Power and Energy Kanchana Wijesekara, taking to Twitter, said that the government has no choice but to register consumers at filling stations and give them a guaranteed weekly fuel quota until they are able to strengthen the financial situation, restore 24-hour power and a steady supply of fuel. He added that he expects the system to go into effect by the first week of July. The minister said that until the country has uninterrupted power supply and steady fuel supply, the fuel line management will be impossible, adding that this is because consumers collect on fuel for a month or more for their machinery and generators despite financial restrictions that have been put in place. Minister Kanchana Wijesekara went on to say that 24-hour power supply costs an additional $100 million monthly for diesel, furnace oil and naphtha, and the shortage in gas supply has increased the demand for electricity and kerosene. $550 million is required currently to source fuel. It was $200 million 4 months ago. The move to ration fuel comes in the backdrop of Sri Lanka's lifeline for supplying fuel to the masses, the $500 million Indian credit line, which was extended by another $200 million in May, expected to end on the 22nd of June. On Friday, the Energy Minister said that the country will receive its last consignment of diesel and petrol under the Indian line of credit on the 16th and the 22nd of June. However, the minister stated that India has granted approval for another $500 million credit line, which the government expects to use next month.
Now, on the issue of domestic cooking gas, people continue to stand in lengthy queues day after day in the hope of securing LP gas cylinders, despite major supplier Litrogas Lanka Limited urging people to refrain from doing so.
people are seen standing in queues outside domestic gas retail outlets, despite suppliers announcing there will be no LPG cylinders in the market soon. State-owned Litrogas, the major supplier to the market, said the company was unable to source 2.5 million rupees to procure LPG from a shipment anchored off the coast of Colombo. Addressing a media briefing, advertising manager of Litrogas Lanka Limited, Pial Koloma Hettige, cited poor management at the company apart from the dollar shortage as a reason for Litro being unable to meet the demands of the people.
2019 රුපියල් බිලියන 20ක වත්කම් තිබුණු ලිට්‍රෝ ගෑස් ලංකා සමාගම අද රුපියල් බිලියන 10ක් ණයයි. ලිට්‍රෝ ගෑස් ලංකා සමාගමට බලපාලා තියෙන්නේ ඩොලර් ප්‍රශ්නයම නෙමෙයි. මේකට බලපාපු ප්‍රධාන සාධකය තමයි අදුරදර්ශී අඥානවත් පසුගිය වසර කිහිපය තුළ සිදු වූ පාලනය. අපිට ඇයි ගෑස් සැපයුම් අතර උනේ? අපිට ගෑස් සැපයුම් කරන්නේ මාසකට ගෑස් මෙට්‍රික් ටොන් මිලියන 2කට වඩා වැඩියෙන් සපයන සමාගම. මේ තට්ටු මාරු සභාපතිලා බෝලේ පාස් කරන එකෙන් උනේ අපේ කලාපේ හොඳම ගෑස් සැපයුම් කරුවාව අපි තරහ කරගත්තා. අද වෙලා තියෙන්නේ මේ විදි ගෑස් නැව මොහොතේ තිබුණාට මේක න තීරණ ගන්න සභාපතිවරයෙක් නැහැ.
Prime Minister Ranil Wickremesinghe says Sri Lanka may have to go to Russia to buy oil from Russia if no other sources work out. In an interview with the Associated Press, the Sri Lankan Premier said he will first look to other sources but would be open to buying more crude from Moscow. In another interview with an Indian media outlet, the Prime Minister meanwhile said that discussions on debt restructuring with China had begun, adding that the Chinese government has agreed to a donor conference.
Petrol and gas queues are stretching kilometers. How do you, as a citizen of Sri Lanka, feel about the situation?
Terrible, both as a citizen and as Prime Minister. I've generally been in governments where I ensured people had 3 meals and the income is being increased. We need the fuel, and now we are negotiating with private suppliers. It's not that we go and buy anything, it's the private suppliers who give us oil and we buy it from them. The issue here is that there's a lot of oil going around which can be sourced back informally to Iran or to Russia. So sometimes you may not know what oil you are buying, but we are looking at other sources of oil, fuel that are traditional sources from the Middle East.
I mean, it seems like you still need more fuel, so would you consider?
We will, yes. If we can get from any other sources, we'll get from there, otherwise they may have to go to Russia again.
Meanwhile, Prime Minister Ranil Wickremesinghe also gave an interview to India media channel WION, where he was quizzed about China's assistance to Sri Lanka and the 21st Amendment.
Have you discussed the possibility of restructuring loans from China? They make up 10% of your external debt.
We have to take up restructuring all the loans, both from the donors as well as the private investors. It's in the case of the donors, it's that we have to ensure that all of them agree to the restructuring plan, because only Japan is in the Paris Club, China and India out of the Paris Club. So we've got to get agreement among them.
But I'm asking specifically about China. Have you discussed restructuring of these loans?
Matter has been taken up. I have not discussed yet, but I will be discussing with China.
Would you say that China has ditched Sri Lanka in its hour of need?
I won't say that. I don't think they have ditched Sri Lanka. China has shown interest, and it's a question of working it out.
How are they engaging with Sri Lanka at the moment?
At the crisis, the last few months they've been silent. I don't know how much government had negotiated earlier, but I intend to start talking with the Chinese and get them into the donor conference. They've agreed to get into the donor conference and get help that way.
You're saying last few months they've been silent. Last few months have been the worst phase for Sri Lanka since its independence. Do you not see that as a betrayal when your country really needed donors/investors like China?
They helped in some ways, but the big arrangement didn't come through because we focused on India. I don't think they could get much from Japan or China at that time.
So you're saying that if anything was lacking in terms of an engagement, it was Colombo's fault and not necessarily Beijing's?
No, it's not fault. We decided that we'll go along with India because India came up with the money quickly, and that's what we wanted. It's a question of who had less red tape.
India had less red tape?
For the first time.
Have you spoken to Prime Minister Modi?
Not yet. I've been talking with the two ministers. We're settling it at that level. I'll speak to the Prime Minister once we work it out. I had a long chat with the Finance Minister and also with Mr. Jaishankar.
What will you tell Prime Minister Modi?
Thank you.
Apart from economic reforms, you're also looking at political reforms, and there's a lot of talk around the constitutional amendment, the 21st Amendment being discussed, which will weaken the powers of the President. What is the progress on that front?
Well, we had 2 rounds of discussions with the party leaders, and there was an agreement Now, this was sent to Cabinet last week, went at the last moment, so there was a request for more time. It will be taken up at the next meeting, and thereafter the 21st Amendment would be presented to the other party leaders.
So you're saying that the Cabinet did not approve it because they did not get enough time?
No, we brought into Cabinet as it started, so members asked for more time to go through it. That's it.
You think the SLPP is on board?
I get the feeling, yeah.
And the President?
President seems, yes, certainly.
Sri Lanka's Foreign Affairs Minister Professor G.L. Peiris held bilateral talks with Australia's Deputy Prime Minister Dr. Richard Marles on exploring opportunities to bring more assistance to the island nation. Now, the meeting was held in Singapore on the sidelines of the Shangri-La Dialogue. Minister of Foreign Affairs Professor G.L. Peiris met with Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Defence of Australia Dr. Richard Marles recently on the sidelines of the Shangri-La Dialogue in Singapore. During the meeting, Minister Peiris thanked the Australian government for announcing targeted development assistance to the value of 2.5 million Australian dollars to boost food security in Sri Lanka through the World Food Programme and the Food and Agriculture Organisation. The Sri Lankan Foreign Minister expressed appreciation for Australia's overall and package of support, which amounts to 117 million Australian dollars to Sri Lanka's COVID-19 response and donation of equipment and gear to assist the coastal clearing efforts after the MV Express Pearl disaster. The discussion also covered the current situation in Sri Lanka and ways in which Australia can assist. Measures against human smuggling, immigration and border management cooperation increased opportunities for Sri Lankan students and enhanced cooperation in international bodies like the ASEAN Regional Forum, the Bali Process, the Commonwealth and the Indian Ocean Rim Association were also discussed during the talks. Sri Lanka Navy, meanwhile, apprehended a local multi-day fishing trawler with 38 individuals suspected to be on an illegal migration attempt to Australia via sea during a search operation carried out in the southeastern seas of the island yesterday. The apprehended individuals in the search operation mounted in seas of Okanda in Ampara included 26 men, comprising of 6 persons involved in this racket, 5 women and 7 children. Also with the suspects, the fishing vessel was seized by the Navy. The suspects held in this operation are residents of Jaffna, Vaunia, Valachene, Chilau, Kalpitia, Udapur, Jaela and Nigambo areas aged between 2 and 60 years. They have been handed over to the Pannama police for onward legal proceedings. The Navy urges the public to avoid being convicted before the law by being caught in the trap of smugglers who persuade the innocent to engage in illegal and perilous sea voyages to migrate from the island nation to other countries. Now, the Australian government has continuously said that they do not support such illegal immigrants who are arrested and deported immediately. Chairman of CEB issues apology to India. Details after this break.
Big 3.
Welcome back to the news. The United Nations Humanitarian Agency warned that Sri Lanka's unprecedented economic crisis could develop into a full-blown humanitarian emergency, as they have estimated that nearly 5.7 million people are already in need of assistance. Speaking to media on Friday, its spokesperson Jens Lark said that UN and its partners are appealing for $47 million to address the immediate needs of the 1.7 million of the most vulnerable people and those most affected by the crisis.
Sri Lanka is facing its worst economic crisis since independence in 1948. We are concerned that this could develop into a full-blown humanitarian emergency, and we are taking action to address that concern. The United Nations in Sri Lanka, with our partner NGOs, launched a $47 million plan to immediately address the needs of 1.7 million of the most vulnerable and most affected people. Overall, the humanitarian country team estimates that nearly 5.7 million people are in need of humanitarian assistance. The 4-month plan that we have just launched focuses on immediate life-saving humanitarian relief for those most affected, but it's also designed with development organizations to prevent that an even bigger humanitarian crisis occurs in the future.
Taking you to business news, import expenditure in Sri Lanka declined year-on-year for the second consecutive month in April, while earnings from exports increased in the month of April this year, as per the external sector performance report issued by the central bank. Now, the reduction in imports gathered pace in the 2022 month of May, as per the provisional data from customs, and as a result, the trade deficit recorded a notable year-on-year contraction. The deficit in the trade account has narrowed to $729 million compared to the deficit of $889 million recorded in April 2021. Expenditure on merchandise imports marginally declined by 0.5% to $1.69 billion compared to $1.7 billion recorded in April of last year. Earnings from merchandise exports increased by 18.5% over April 2021, recording $970 million. Workers' remittances in the meantime were recorded at $249 million during April 2022, in comparison to $318 million in the previous month and $519 million in the corresponding month in the previous year, that is April 2021. Tourist arrivals were recorded as at 62,980 in April compared to 100,500 arrivals recorded in March this year. Earnings from tourism in the month are estimated at $113 million in comparison to $192 million in March. The central bank says that its measures into the current exchange rate arrangement and other policies have had positive impact in the country. The central bank stated that import expenditure declined notably in May compared to the April period due to restrictions imposed on open accounts and consignment payments. It stated that the forex policy had helped it gain remittances to the country. Consequently, inflows on account of workers' remittances to the banking system have gathered pace since the introduction of the new exchange rate arrangement, with worker remittances reported at $304.1 billion in May compared to $249 billion that was recorded in April this year. The central bank has taken measures since March to ensure that the country would be able to earn necessary dollars that it lacks at the moment to meet daily demands. The Monetary Authority states that among a host of measures such as restrictions imposed on open accounts and consignment payments, floating of the exchange rate has raised forex gains to the country in the month of May. Agriculture Minister Mahinda Amaraveera says that uncultivated or abandoned paddy lands across the island are to be acquired for a period of 5 years for the cultivation of food crop. The Minister of Agriculture and Conservation says that the relevant program to cultivate food crops in these lands will be launched immediately. In this backdrop, and in the economic crisis that Sri Lanka is faced with and a possible food shortage, many people have already turned to home gardening in the hope of overcoming any possible food shortages in the country. AdaDerana has received reports from several areas that farmers who had given up cultivation due to the current fertilizer crisis are also resuming their cultivation. Chairman of Ceylon Electricity Board MMC Fernando apologized from the COPE over the allegation he levelled, stating that the wind power plant project in Mannar was handed over to Adani Group of India due to pressure exerted by the Indian government. In a letter to COPE Chairman Professor Charita Herath, he said that during the discussion he became so emotional due to pressures and unreasonable allegations levelled against him to issue his official letter of request, and therefore he was compelled without limitation to express the statement, saying, quote, stressed by the Prime Minister of India, unquote, which is totally incorrect.
On Friday, Chairman of the Ceylon Electricity Board MMC Ferdinando claimed before the Committee of Public Enterprises that the President had told him to hand over the tender for the wind power plant in Mannar to India's Adani Group due to pressure exerted on him by Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi. However, President Gotabaya Rajapaksa denied the statement of the CB chairman, stating that he had not had any time given authorization to award a wind power project in Mannar to any person or any institution. In a media communique, President's media division said that Sri Lanka is currently in an acute shortage of power, and the President decides to expedite implementation of mega power projects as early as possible. However, no undue influence will be used to awarding such projects. The statement also said that project proposals for large-scale renewable energy projects is limited, but special attention will be paid to the selection of institutions for the projects, which will be carried out strictly in accordance with the transparent and accountable system of the government of Sri Lanka. Meanwhile, in a letter to COPE last night, Chairman Professor Charita Herath, CB Chairman apologized unconditionally over the statement made by him at the COPE regarding the awarding of the Mannar wind power project to Indian conglomerate Adani, and said he wishes to withdraw the statement, which is totally incorrect. Ferdinando said that during his discussions he became so emotional due to pressure and unreasonable allegations levelled against him due to issue the official letter of request. Therefore, due to unexpected pressure and emotions, he was compelled without limitation to express the statement, saying, stressed by the Prime Minister of India, which is totally incorrect.
Well, Sri Lanka Cricket says in collaboration with the Ministry of Tourism, it has decided to dedicate the first test match to be played between Sri Lanka and Australia to cricketing legend, the late Shane Warne. One of the greatest cricketers to have played the game, Warne passed away in March this year, much to the shock and grief of the entire cricketing world. Shane Warne has been one of Sri Lanka's fierce rivals on the field and a dearest friend off the field. He was an instrumental figure in helping rebuild Sri Lanka cricket following the tsunami devastation in 2004. Now, the first test match between the hosts and the touring Australians will be played at the Galle International Cricket Ground on the 29th of June. Sri Lanka's Minister of Tourism, Harin Fernando, has confirmed to a news agency that Cricket Australia has confirmed that Warne's wife and family members are also expected to attend the Warne Memorial Test match here in Sri Lanka. That's all for today. Thank you for watching. Good night.